From the outside, Arjun and Meera looked like the kind of couple others envied. Their modest two-bedroom apartment in a bustling Indian neighborhood seemed filled with warmth. Every morning, Arjun left for work, neatly dressed, briefcase in hand, while Meera waved him goodbye from the balcony, her smile glowing in the early sunlight. Neighbors often commented on how lucky they were, stable, respectable, happy. But behind closed doors, the truth was more complicated. Arjun was 34, steady, methodical, the kind of man who valued routine. His life revolved around his office job, monthly savings and quiet evenings spent reading the newspaper. Meera, 5 years younger, was vibrant and restless. Marriage had given her comfort, but it had also caged a part of her that longed for adventure, attention, and passion. Their lives, though bound by vows, ran on parallel tracks that rarely met. Arjun believed love was proven through responsibility, paying bills on time, ensuring the fridge was stocked, repairing whatever broke in the house. Meera craved words, touch, moments of fire that Arjun rarely offered. One evening, as Arjun sipped his tea, he noticed her gaze lingering out the window. "You're quiet today," he said softly. Meera didn't turn to him. "Just tired," she replied, her voice flat. He wanted to believe her, but the pause between them stretched, thick with unspoken thoughts. He folded his newspaper and forced a smile. "Maybe we should go out this weekend. Dinner. Somewhere nice." Her lips curved slightly, but her eyes stayed distant. "We'll see." To outsiders, their marriage sparkled with harmony. They attended festivals together, their coordinated outfits earning compliments. They hosted neighbors for tea, laughter filling the room. Yet the moment the door closed, silence often swallowed their home. Meera spent more time at the gym, telling herself it was for health, though deep down she enjoyed the escape it offered. She returned flushed, energized in a way Arjun couldn't understand. He never questioned her absences, choosing trust over confrontation. Still, when she walked in late, brushing off explanations, a flicker of unease rose in his chest before he buried it. At night, Arjun sometimes watched her as she scrolled through her phone, light dancing across her face. He wanted to reach out, to ask what she was thinking, but something always stopped him. Fear, perhaps, of hearing an answer he wasn't ready for. In her heart, Meera wrestled with guilt. She told herself she loved Arjun, at least the version of him who cared, who provided. But she also knew love, as she imagined it, demanded more than stability. The cracks in their bond widened quietly, invisible to everyone else. On Sundays, when they visited Meera's parents, her mother praised Arjun as the perfect son-in-law. Meera smiled dutifully, but inside, her thoughts drifted elsewhere. Arjun noticed her fading laughter, yet convinced himself all marriages carried seasons of distance. Theirs was not yet broken, but fragile, like a glass vase balanced on the edge of a table, one tremor away from shattering. Neither of them knew it yet, but soon that tremor was coming. For Meera, the gym began as an excuse. At first, she convinced herself it was simply about health, keeping her body fit, channeling restless energy into something productive. But soon, it became more than a place of exercise. It was freedom. Inside the echoing halls of steel and mirrors, Meera felt alive. The rhythmic clang of weights, the pulse of music, the sweat-soaked determination around her, all of it distracted her from the dull repetition of home. Here, no one saw her as only Arjun's wife. She was just Meera. It was during one of these sessions that she noticed him, Rohan, the personal trainer. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a voice that carried both command and warmth. He wasn't the kind of man who blended into the background. His smile had a way of making people feel seen, and his easy charm drew others in. Their first conversation was incidental. "You're holding that wrong," Rohan said, stepping closer as she tried to lift a dumbbell. Meera frowned. "I've been doing it this way for weeks. Which is why your wrist hurts, right?" His tone wasn't mocking, but teasing, confident. She looked at him skeptically, then followed his adjustment. The weight suddenly felt lighter, more balanced. She gave a small laugh, surprised. Okay, maybe you know what you're talking about. Maybe? His grin widened. Trust me, I do. From then on, their encounters became regular. A passing comment, a shared joke, a correction here and there. At first, it was harmless, the sort of banter that brightens long hours of routine. But beneath it, something else stirred. Something both of them pretended not to notice. Rohan had a way of asking questions that lingered. So, what do you do when you're not here? He asked one afternoon, leaning on the treadmill next to hers. Mira hesitated, wiping her brow. Mostly home things. That's it? A woman like you deserves more than just home things. The words sank deep, even though she brushed them off with a laugh. Nobody else spoke to her that way anymore, as though she were still capable of wanting, of dreaming. At home, her conversations with Arjun revolved around groceries, bills, and routine. At the gym, with Rohan, she rediscovered pieces of herself she thought had been buried. She began dressing more carefully before leaving for workouts, choosing clothes that made her feel confident. She checked her reflection longer in the mirror. When Arjun noticed and asked casually, "New top?" she only smiled vaguely and muttered, "On sale." Weeks slipped by, and the lines blurred. Rohan started lingering after her sessions. Sometimes he'd walk her to the exit, their shoulders brushing in ways that felt accidental but weren't. Once, during a quiet evening, he handed her a water bottle after a particularly intense set. His fingers brushed hers, and she didn't pull away. There were glances, longer than necessary. Smiles, warmer than appropriate. Words, carrying undertones both thrilling and dangerous. Mira told herself it was innocent. She needed someone to talk to, someone to remind her she was still alive. Yet deep down, she felt the shift. The gym wasn't just about fitness anymore. It was about Rohan. At home, Arjun remained oblivious, caught up in his routines. When Mira returned flushed, he assumed it was from the workout. When she laughed suddenly at her phone, he thought it was from some video. Trust was his default, and she didn't challenge it. But every secret has weight, and hers was beginning to press down. The late-night thoughts, the lingering touches, the growing hunger for something she couldn't name. It was only a matter of time before the cracks widened. What began as an escape was quietly becoming a trap of its own. And Mira, though she didn't yet realize it, was stepping into a storm she would never be able to outrun. Arjun had always thought of himself as a rational man. He believed in routine, in predictability, in the comfort of a steady life. But lately, the rhythm of his home felt offbeat, as if a song he knew by heart had suddenly shifted key. At first, it was little things. Mira returned from the gym later than usual, her excuses vague. Traffic was bad, she'd say, slipping off her shoes, or, I stayed back to stretch. Arjun nodded, telling himself it was nothing. After all, she had every right to her own time. But the excuses began stacking like stones. Some nights she came home distracted, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. When it buzzed, she tilted the screen away, laughing softly before typing back quickly. Arjun tried not to notice, but the image burned into him, her lips curved in a smile that wasn't his. One night, unable to sleep, he sat in the living room, staring at the dark outline of their wedding photo on the wall. Mira had been radiant that day, eyes lit with trust. The memory felt distant now, blurred by shadows. When she finally walked in close to midnight, she jumped slightly at seeing him awake. "You're still up?" she asked. I couldn't sleep. His voice was calm, but his eyes searched her face. "Where were you?" "The gym." She shrugged, dropping her bag by the door. Lost track of time. Arjun wanted to believe her. He told himself he had no reason to doubt, that suspicion would poison what they had. But as she moved past him, he caught the faint scent of cologne, not hers, not his. The following days became a silent test of will. He watched her more closely, noting the hurried whispers on the phone, the way she lingered in the balcony with the door half closed. Once, he approached quietly and heard her laugh, low, intimate, like the way she used to laugh with him years ago. When he stepped out, she stiffened and ended the call. "Who was it?" he asked. "A friend," she replied too quickly, too easily. At work, his colleagues noticed his distraction. He lost track of conversations, stared blankly at documents. "Everything all right at home?" one asked gently. Arjun forced a smile. "Yeah, just a bit tired." But inside, exhaustion wasn't the problem. It was the gnawing uncertainty that hollowed him out. Nights stretched long. He'd lie awake, hearing the soft vibration of her phone on the nightstand, her fingers moving quickly in the dark. Once, he pretended to sleep, eyes barely open, and saw her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. The expression there, tender, alive, almost guilty, was one she no longer wore for him. Doubt became a shadow that followed him everywhere. He hated himself for it, hated the thought of mistrusting her. But he couldn't shake it. His mind replayed scenarios he didn't want to imagine. Mira laughing with another man, her hands touching, her heart drifting further from his reach. Still, he clung to hope. "It's just my paranoia," he whispered to himself, over and over. "She loves me. She wouldn't." But the evidence piled higher. The late returns, the distracted gaze, the cologne, each detail carved into his chest like a blade. He didn't confront her directly. Fear held him back. Fear of losing her. Fear of hearing the truth he wasn't ready to face. And yet, in the silence of his sleepless nights, Arjun knew the fragile balance was tipping. Something had already slipped away, and denial could only hold back the inevitable for so long. Arjun's restless nights and gnawing doubts painted one side of the story. On the other, Mira was spiraling into a world she had never imagined for herself. It had started innocently enough. Stolen glances at the gym, a lingering touch as Rohan corrected her posture during a workout. His confidence was magnetic, his words smooth yet dangerous. Mira had told herself it was harmless, a distraction from the monotony of marriage, nothing more. But distractions have a way of turning into obsessions. One rainy evening, the gym was nearly empty. Thunder rolled outside, and the smell of damp air lingered as Rohan leaned closer, his voice low. "You've been pushing yourself hard lately," he murmured, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "But I think there's more you're carrying than just weights." Mira's heart pounded. She should have pulled away, should have reminded herself that she was married, that Arjun was waiting at home. Instead, she let the silence linger, her eyes locked with his. That night, the line was crossed. What began as a fleeting touch became a kiss, desperate and hungry, the kind that burned with forbidden urgency. In the dimly lit corner of the training room, where the mirrors reflected every stolen moment, they surrendered to something neither could undo. Afterwards, she sat breathless, her hands trembling as reality crashed in. "This can't happen again," she whispered, guilt already clawing at her chest. Rohan only smiled, his gaze steady. "You've been living in a cage. Don't you deserve to feel alive?" His words echoed in her mind long after she left, her clothes clinging to her skin from the rain. At home, Arjun was half asleep on the couch, the television flickering silently. She looked at him, at the man who had built a life with her, and for the first time felt like an intruder in her own marriage. Days turned into weeks, and the secret only, deepened. Mira found excuses to stay longer at the gym, to slip away for coffee runs that stretched into hours. The thrill consumed her. The danger of being caught, the rush of feeling desired, the illusion of freedom. But with passion came recklessness. Rohan grew bolder, sending messages late at night, sometimes even when Arjun was in the same room. Mira's phone would vibrate, and her breath would hitch as she read words that were both intoxicating and damning. Thinking of you. Can't wait until tomorrow. Miss the way you look at me. Every message was a thread pulling her further into the fire. At the same time, shadows began to gather. A neighbor mentioned seeing her leave the gym with Rohan, their laughter too casual, too intimate. A friend asked why she was so distant, her mind always elsewhere. Even Arjun, though silent, was no longer blind. His eyes lingered longer on her, heavy with unspoken suspicion. And still, Mira couldn't stop. The stolen hours with Rohan became her escape, her rebellion against the suffocating routine of her marriage. With him, she felt powerful, alive, desired. But beneath the heat of their secret, an unease simmered. She knew the risk. She knew the cost. One night, lying in Rohan's arms after another secret meeting, she whispered, "If anyone finds out—" "They won't," he cut her off, his tone confident, almost dismissive. "As long as you trust me." She nodded, but her heart betrayed her with its trembling rhythm, because deep down, Mira knew secrets had a way of surfacing, no matter how carefully buried. Outside, the storm of consequences was already gathering, unseen but inevitable. And soon, both passion and betrayal would collide with a force neither she nor Rohan could control. The storm inside Mira's heart followed her home, and no amount of forced smiles could disguise it. Arjun, already uneasy from weeks of suspicion, felt the widening distance like a crack splitting open in their once stable foundation. At first, it was subtle. She came home later than usual, claiming the gym had extended classes or that she stopped to grab groceries. She laughed less, spoke less, and avoided his gaze during dinner. Arjun noticed everything. One evening, as she set down a plate of food, he asked quietly, "Why are you always late these days?" Mira froze for a fraction of a second before plastering on a smile. "You know how traffic gets, and I've been pushing harder at the gym, that's all." Arjun nodded, but didn't believe her. He wanted to, but doubt had already wormed its way into his heart. That night, while Mira showered, he sat in their dimly lit bedroom and opened a notebook. On the first page he wrote, "Late again. Said traffic. Smelled like perfume, not sweat." The act felt strange, almost obsessive, but it gave him a sense of control. If he could document the signs, maybe he could prove to himself whether he was imagining things or uncovering a truth too painful to face. Days passed, and the arguments grew sharper. One Saturday, when she told him she needed to run errands after already spending hours at the gym, Arjun snapped. "Errands? Again? Mira, you barely spend any time here anymore." She turned, eyes flashing. "So now I need your permission to live my life? I can't even breathe without you questioning me." The words stung, but it was the coldness in her tone that truly cut him. Arjun stared at her, the woman he had once believed was his partner, his safe place. "Why are you pushing me away?" he asked, voice low. For a moment her face softened, as if guilt tried to surface, but she buried it quickly. "You're imagining things, Arjun. You've become paranoid. Maybe if you trusted me more, we wouldn't have these fights." The manipulation was subtle, yet devastating. She flipped his concerns back onto him, making him question his own sanity. And though anger simmered beneath his skin, a part of him clung to hope that she was telling the truth. That night he added another entry in his notebook. Defensive. Blamed me. Said I'm paranoid. But why does she avoid my eyes? The notebook became his silent confidant. page after page filled with times, dates, and observations. Each word was both a record and a release, evidence for a trial only he could see. Still, he longed for proof, something undeniable that could shatter the fog of doubt. Meanwhile, Mira's guilt transformed into irritation. The more suspicious Arjun became, the colder she grew. Their once warm home turned into a battleground of silence, broken only by sudden bursts of arguments. Meals were eaten in strained quiet. Nights were spent on opposite sides of the bed, their bodies inches apart, yet worlds away. And yet, despite it all, Arjun still loved her. That was the cruelest part. He remembered the early years, the laughter, the shared dreams, and wished desperately to bring that woman back. But each time he looked at her now, he saw a stranger wearing her face. One evening, unable to bear the silence, he whispered, "If something's wrong, just tell me. I can take it." Mira turned off the lamp and rolled to her side, her back facing him. "There's nothing to tell," she muttered, her voice a wall he couldn't break through. Arjun lay awake, the shadows pressing down around him, clutching his notebook like a lifeline. His suspicions were no longer fleeting thoughts. They were becoming evidence of a betrayal waiting to be exposed. And in the quiet of that night, one thought echoed louder than all others. Sooner or later, the truth would come for him. The notebook was no longer enough. Arjun's pages overflowed with suspicions, dates, and hollow reassurances scribbled in restless handwriting, but none of it gave him the certainty he craved. Each line only deepened the torment. Was he truly paranoid? Or was his wife slipping away into someone else's arms? That Friday evening, the ache in his chest finally outweighed his hesitation. Mira had dressed carefully before leaving. Hair styled, perfume faint but noticeable, gym bag slung casually over her shoulder. She said she'd be late, claiming her trainer was adjusting her program. Arjun smiled back, but inside, something hardened. When the door closed behind her, he grabbed his jacket and keys. Tonight, he would stop writing in the shadows. Tonight, he would see for himself. The drive to the gym felt endless, headlights carving tunnels through the dark. Arjun's pulse raced, palms slick against the steering wheel. With every turn, his mind replayed their arguments, her accusations of paranoia, her evasive smiles. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize. I'll burn that notebook. But if I'm right... He parked a short distance away, waiting in the shadows, heart hammering against his ribs. Through the glass front of the gym, he caught a glimpse of Mira's bright leggings, her laughter spilling too easily as she greeted Rohan, the trainer Arjun had only seen once before. Jealousy hit him like a punch. Rohan was tall, broad-shouldered, confident, the kind of man who lived under fluorescent lights and mirrors, who thrived on admiration. Arjun, with his long office hours and quiet demeanor, felt smaller just looking at him. For a moment, Arjun told himself to leave, to turn the key, drive home, and smother his doubts. But his legs carried him forward, through the door, across the hall of machines humming with music and sweat. Mira and Rohan disappeared down the corridor toward the locker raw. Ooms. Arjun followed, each step heavier than the last. The bathroom door wasn't fully closed. Voices floated through the narrow gap, her hushed laughter, his low murmur, the rustle of fabric too intimate to mistake. Arjun's chest tightened. He pushed the door open. The scene inside seared into his vision. Mira pinned against the tiled wall, lips pressed against Rohan's, hands clutching desperately at him. Her gym bag lay abandoned on the counter, clothes scattered carelessly. "Mira?" Arjun's voice broke, jagged and raw. She froze, eyes wide with horror. Rohan turned, startled, his grip loosening. For a moment, silence stretched, broken only by the dripping faucet. "Arjun, this isn't what it looks like," Mira stammered, pulling away, face pale. "Don't you dare!" Arjun roared, his voice echoing off the tiles. Don't you dare lie to me again! Rohan stepped forward, defensive, hands raised. Calm down, man. Let's talk. Talk? Arjun's laughter was bitter, a jagged wound. While you're screwing my wife in a bathroom? The words landed heavy. Mira flinched, guilt flashing across her face before anger replaced it. If you'd given me the attention I needed, if you weren't always doubting me— Don't twist this on me, Arjun shouted, veins bulging in his neck. You've been lying, sneaking, humiliating me while I begged for the truth. The room vibrated with rage and betrayal. Arjun's fists clenched, every muscle tight with fury. Rohan stepped between them, voice stern. That's enough. You need to leave. But Arjun's eyes burned only for Mira. I gave you everything. My trust. My life. And this is what you do in return? Mira's lips trembled. For a moment she looked ready to cry. Then she whispered, I never meant for you to find out like this. That final admission shattered him. There was no denial left, no illusion to cling to. The truth lay bare, ugly, undeniable, and fatal. Arjun backed away, his breath ragged, vision blurred by rage and heartbreak. He wanted to strike, to scream, to destroy the tiled prison that bore witness to his ruin. But instead, he stumbled into the hallway, the echo of Mira's words chasing him into the night. Outside, the cold air slapped him. His knees threatened to give way, but his fury held him upright. He gripped the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles whitened, trembling with the knowledge that his world had collapsed in a single moment. In the quiet of his car, tears finally came, hot, violent, unstoppable. He had his proof. He had his answer. And with it came a darkness deeper than any he had ever known. Arjun drove home alone, the silence of the road pressing against his ears. The notebook lay waiting on the bedside table, each page now vindicated. Yet instead of relief, only rage lingered. Tonight was discovery. Tomorrow, it would be reckoning. Arjun didn't sleep after that night of discovery. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the shadows shifted with the dawn. Mira had returned hours later, avoiding his eyes, retreating silently into the bathroom. No words were exchanged, no apologies offered. The silence was heavier than any confession. His notebook lay open beside him, pages marked with trembling ink. The evidence was complete now. The betrayal was no longer suspicion. It was fact, raw and cruel. Yet proof brought no peace, only rage, pounding like a war drum in his skull. By the next evening, the fury had hardened into resolve. When Mira grabbed her gym bag again, claiming another late workout, Arjun followed. Not with hesitation this time, but with purpose. His mind was set. He needed answers. Closure, or perhaps revenge. The gym glowed with sterile fluorescent lights. Music thumped faintly from the main hall, but the corridors toward the locker rooms were quieter, dimmer. Arjun's footsteps echoed as he approached. The bathroom door was shut this time, locked from within. Muffled voices leaked through. Mira's laugh, soft and familiar, tangled with Rohan's deeper tone. The sound ignited him. A match dropped into gasoline. Arjun slammed his fist against the door. Mira! A startled gasp inside. Shuffling. Then silence. Open it! His voice cracked with rage. The lock clicked hesitantly. Rohan's face appeared first, tense and defensive. You need to leave, man. This isn't— Arjun shoved the door wide. Mira stood behind Rohan, half-dressed, cheeks flushed with fear and shame. Arjun, please, she started. Don't you say my name, he snapped, eyes blazing. Don't you dare! The confrontation erupted in seconds. Rohan raised his hands, trying to calm him. Look, it just happened. We didn't mean... Arjun's voice was venom. You destroy my marriage, humiliate me, and you say you didn't mean? Meera cried out, Stop it, both of you! But the red haze in Arjun's vision drowned her out. Months of doubt, humiliation, and longing surged all at once. He lunged forward, shoving Rohan against the tiled wall. The sound reverberated, a hollow crash that shook the room. Arjun! Meera screamed. Rohan swung back, fist connecting with Arjun's jaw. Pain shot through him, but it only fueled the fire. He tackled Rohan, both of them crashing into the counter, shattering the mirror above. Shards rained down like glass rain, glittering with the reflection of violence. Stop! Meera pleaded, trying to pull them apart. Her voice was raw, desperate but powerless against the storm. Arjun's hands found a jagged piece of glass. His grip tightened, blood seeping from his palm. Rohan struggled beneath him, eyes flashing with fear. Think, man. This isn't worth it, Rohan gasped, voice breaking. But Arjun's thoughts were gone. Only betrayal remained, screaming louder than reason. With a guttural roar, he drove the shard downward. Rohan's scream choked off, body convulsing before collapsing. The blood spread fast, mingling with the water dripping from the broken faucet. Meera shrieked, stumbling back against the wall, hands trembling. Her eyes locked on Arjun, wide with terror. You killed him? She whispered, voice hollow. Arjun turned to her, chest heaving, glass still slick in his hand. You made me, he said, his voice shaking between rage and despair. She shook her head violently. No, Arjun, please. I never wanted... Liar, he roared, advancing. Every smile, every secret. You laughed while I tore myself apart. Meera tried to dart past him, but his hand caught her wrist. In her struggle, she clawed at his arm, tears streaking her face. Let me go, she screamed. But his fury, now unstoppable, dragged her back. The shard flashed once more, and silence fell almost instantly. Her body crumpled beside Rohan's, lifeless eyes staring at the cracked ceiling. The gym bathroom, once a place of mirrors and sweat, was now painted with betrayal and blood. Arjun staggered back, chest heaving, glass slipping from his hand. The room spun, the metallic tang of blood filling his nostrils. His knuckles throbbed, his jaw ached, but none of it matched the hollow agony tearing through his chest. He looked at them. Meera and Rohan, still, silent, gone. His world was now a graveyard of choices. The dripping faucet was the only sound, rhythmic and cruel, as if mocking him. Arjun pressed his hands to his head, trembling. What have I done? The bathroom was no longer just a room. It was a crime scene. His crime scene. And outside those doors, the world kept moving, unaware of the storm that had erupted within these tiles. Arjun stumbled out of the gym bathroom, the door swinging behind him with a faint creak. His shirt clung to his skin, damp with sweat and spattered crimson. His breaths came sharp, uneven, as if his lungs were rejecting the very air he tried to draw in. For a moment, he leaned against the cool corridor wall, palms trembling, trying to steady himself. The music from the main hall still played faintly, an upbeat track that mocked the roar sealed inside those tiles. He forced himself forward, each step heavy, his ears ringing. Every corner of the gym seemed to hold a shadow, watching, accusing. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Outside, the night air slapped against his face, cold and sharp. He gulped it down greedily, but the relief never came. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars under flickering street lamps. His own vehicle stood there like an anchor. Arjun fumbled with the keys, nearly dropping them, before sliding into the driver's seat. For a long moment, he just sat there. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, while his reflection in the rearview mirror stared back at him, wild-eyed, unrecognizable. He saw not himself, but the man who had left two lifeless bodies behind. The engine roared to life. Arjun drove without thinking, streets blurring past in a haze of neon signs and traffic lights. His mind fractured into pieces, flashes of Mira's scream, Rohan's eyes widening in terror, the sickening thud of glass piercing flesh. Each memory slammed into him like waves, pulling him under. "Stop," he muttered aloud, as if commanding his thoughts. "Stop it." But they wouldn't stop. The more he tried to silence them, the louder they became. His chest tightened, heart pounding, as though the echoes of the bathroom still clung to him, refusing to let go. The city outside was alive. Shops closing, buses clattering by, couples laughing on sidewalks. To them, it was just another night. To him, it was the end of everything. He wanted to scream at them, shake them, make them see what he had done, but no one looked his way. No one cared. At a red light, Arjun's hands shook so violently he almost dropped the gear. He pulled over instead, parking at the side of a quiet street. His head collapsed into his hands, breath ragged. Was it murder? The word clawed at him, sharp and merciless. Or was it justice? Retribution for betrayal? He wanted to believe it was the latter, but deep down the truth burned too brightly. He had crossed a line that could never be undone. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The sound jolted him. With hesitant fingers, he pulled it out. A text glowed on the screen. A message from a coworker. "See you tomorrow at the office?" Tomorrow. As if tomorrow could exist after tonight. He stared at the message, numb. Could he go back to work? Smile at colleagues? Pretend nothing had happened? The absurdity of it almost made him laugh. But no sound came. Only a dry sob. Hours bled away as he drove aimlessly, circling streets he barely recognized. Sometimes he thought of going home, collapsing into his bed, pretending this was all a nightmare. Other times he thought of running, leaving the city, disappearing into the night. But the thought of Mira's eyes, wide, pleading, then lifeless, always dragged him back. There was no escape. Not from this. At one point he stopped at a deserted gas station. He stepped out, staring at his stained shirt. Panic surged. Anyone who saw him would know. He scrubbed at the fabric with water from a restroom sink, but the red traces lingered faintly, mocking his effort. He shoved the shirt into a trash bin and zipped up his jacket. His reflection in the restroom mirror glared back, unfamiliar, fractured. He whispered to it, almost daring it to answer. "You didn't have a choice." But the silence told him otherwise. When he finally returned to the car, dawn was beginning to creep across the horizon. The sky lightened, but for Arjun, the world had only grown darker. He gripped the steering wheel, exhaustion heavy in his bones, yet unable to close his eyes. He told himself he needed time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to decide what came next. But deep down, a seed of dread had already sprouted. The truth wouldn't stay buried forever. The bodies, the blood, the betrayal, they would surface. And when they did, his fragile denial would shatter. For now, though, the city still slept. And Arjun drove on, carrying the weight of 2 lives lost, the silence in his car louder than any scream. The first rays of dawn crept over the city when the silence of the gym was broken. A janitor, arriving early to prepare the space, noticed something wrong. The bathroom door ajar, the faint metallic tang of blood lingering in the air. His footsteps faltered as he pushed the door wider, and the sight before him froze him in place. 2 bodies. Lifeless. The tiled floor, once polished, now smeared with a gruesome reality. Mira, her delicate necklace twisted in her fist. Rohan, his face pale and still, his strength gone in an instant. The janitor stumbled back, fumbling for his phone, his voice cracking as he dialed emergency services. Within minutes, the gym was sealed off. Yellow tape stretched across the entrance, flashing red and blue lights bathing the quiet street. Onlookers gathered in hushed clusters, whispers rising as shock rippled through the neighborhood. News traveled fast. Too fast. The perfect couple everyone thought they knew was now at the center of a nightmare. Detective Sharma was among the first to arrive. A seasoned investigator with lines etched deep across his brow, he had seen his share of violence. Yet something about this scene carried a weight that pressed heavily on his chest. The brutality spoke not just of rage, but of betrayal, intimacy turned lethal. "Secure the area," he ordered firmly, eyes scanning every detail, the shards of a broken phone, the scattered gym towel, the crimson stains that told a story louder than words. Officers moved methodically, photographing, bagging, marking evidence. Sharma crouched near Mira's body, his gaze lingering. She was young, her life cut short in a storm of passion and violence. He glanced toward Rohan, his fists still clenched, as though frozen in his final struggle. A crime of intimacy, Sharma thought. Some, eon close. Someone who knew them. The town reeled. Neighbors recalled the warmth of Arjun and Mira's greetings, the smiles exchanged in passing, but as the hours passed, cracks emerged in the story everyone thought they knew. "She had been distant lately," one neighbor admitted. "I heard arguments at night," another whispered. "She used to come home late from the gym." A voice trailed off, heavy with implication. The whispers spread like wildfire, seeding suspicion, fueling speculation. The investigation moved quickly. Security cameras from the gym provided their first break. Footage showed Mira entering late that evening, Rohan greeting her at the door. Hours later, Arjun appeared on the grainy recording, his expression unreadable, his stride purposeful. He vanished into the corridor where the bathroom was located. And then, nothing. No footage of him leaving, the cameras in the back hallway malfunctioning at the crucial moment. Detective Sharma replayed the clip again and again. "He went in after them," he murmured. "But where's the rest?" The missing footage was suspicious, but not damning. Still, it painted a chilling outline. A husband, a wife, a secret lover, a confrontation. The motive whispered itself into place. Phone records deepened the story. Mira and Rohan exchanged hundreds of messages over the past months, plans to meet, affectionate words, conversations hidden from Arjun. Meanwhile, Arjun's own phone told another tale. Late-night searches about betrayal, infidelity, and, chillingly, what happens if you catch them? Detective Sharma pressed his lips together. The picture was forming, piece by piece. By evening, Arjun's name was on everyone's tongue. Some called him a monster, a man who let rage consume him. Others pitied him, insisting no one could understand the depth of his humiliation. In living rooms and tea stalls, people debated endlessly. Was he driven, or did he choose? Was this crime of passion, or premeditated vengeance? For the police, it didn't matter what people thought. The Avide. An inch was building. Blood traces on the bathroom sink matched Arjun's DNA. His car, found parked erratically that night, held faint smears on the steering wheel. He hadn't reported his wife missing. He hadn't shown his face since the evening of the killings. Detective Sharma stood in the briefing room, photographs spread across the board, faces, timestamps, fragments of shattered lives. He turned to his team. "This isn't just a murder," he said quietly. "It's betrayal that spiraled into violence. A husband, a wife, and a man who got too close. Now we need to find Arjun before he runs, before this story becomes just another headline." The hunt began. Officers fanned out across the city, tracing his bank cards, his phone signals, the places he might hide. But as they searched, the question lingered. Was Arjun a cold-blooded killer, or a broken man pushed to the edge by heartbreak? The answer lay somewhere between blood and silence, waiting to surface in the days ahead. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with the weight of tragedy and curiosity. Cameras lined the steps outside, reporters hungry to turn heartbreak into headlines. Inside, however, the atmosphere was solemn. Every cough, every shuffle of paper, every faint sigh echoed louder than it should have, as though the room itself bore witness to something that had shattered far beyond four walls. At the center sat Arjun, his face gaunt, eyes hollow, hands cuffed. Gone was the man who once walked with quiet pride beside Meera through their neighborhood. He seemed less like a killer and more like a ghost, present, yet already condemned by the whispers that followed him everywhere. The prosecution wasted no time. They painted Arjun as a man consumed not by sudden rage, but by jealousy festering over time. They highlighted the journal he had kept, pages filled with suspicions, late-night entries cataloging Meera's absence, and his own words, "If I catch them, it will end." "Premeditation," the prosecutor said firmly, pacing before the jury. "This was not an accident. It was not merely passion, it was choice. Cold, deliberate choice." They pointed to the security footage, the phone records, the blood in his car. The evidence was woven together with merciless precision, a net designed to leave no gaps. The defense countered with equal fervor. They spoke of humiliation, of betrayal that cuts deeper than any wound. They argued that Arjun had walked in on the most unbearable sight, his wife, entwined with another man. "Can any husband in that moment think rationally?" the defense attorney asked, voice trembling just enough to echo the human cost. This was not premeditation. This was the collapse of a man's world in seconds. He acted as many might, in blind, uncontrollable rage. That does not excuse him, but it explains him. They read aloud passages from Meera's personal journal, uncovered during the investigation. Words of longing, of suffocation in her marriage, of how Rohan made her feel alive. The defense used them to show Arjun's torment, how the very foundation of his life had been corroding beneath him. The courtroom became a theater of shadows. Each testimony pulled the narrative in a new direction. Friends described Arjun as gentle, hard-working, incapable of violence. Others remembered the tension between him and Meera, the cracks that neighbors dismissed as ordinary quarrels. Rohan's reputation, too, was dissected. Former clients testified about his charm, his tendency to blur lines. The prosecution objected, but the whispers had already stained the jury's perception. Arjun himself spoke on the third day. His voice shook as he recalled the night. He described following Meera, heart-pounding, every step praying he was wrong. And then, the bathroom door, the muffled laughter, the sight that shattered him. "I don't remember the first blow," he whispered. "I only remember the silence after. And her eyes. I thought I loved her more than life itself. But in that moment, I didn't know who I was anymore." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge leaned back, his expression unreadable, but his eyes heavy with the tragedy of it all. After days of arguments, evidence, and emotional pleas, the jury withdrew. Hours dragged like eternity. Outside, reporters speculated, anchors debated. Was Arjun a cold-blooded murderer, or a man broken by betrayal? Finally, the jury returned. The foreman's voice was steady as the verdict was delivered. Guilty. Of manslaughter, not premeditated murder. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge, in his measured tone, handed down the sentence. 15 years in prison. A balance, perhaps, between rage and reason. Justice, or as close to it as the law could reach. Arjun bowed his head as the gavel fell. In that moment, the world outside the courtroom roared, headlines screaming, voices debating, but inside him there was only an echoing silence. A silence where Mira's laughter once lived, where the life he imagined had collapsed into rubble. As Arjun was led away, Detective Sharma stood in the back, arms folded. The case was closed, but closure was another matter. He knew the city would talk for years, some condemning, some sympathizing, none truly understanding. Because how could they? How could anyone measure the cost of betrayal, the price of truth, the fragility of love twisted into tragedy? In the end, justice was delivered. But the echoes remained. Whispers in homes, shadows in marriages, a reminder that love can heal and love can destroy. And for Arjun, every day behind bars would be haunted by the same question. Was this destiny inevitable? Or could it all have been prevented, if only love had been enough?